right, hello and welcome to Zero Hanger TV for the 2023 AFL Trade Period wrap-up. Mitch, we did it. We got through it.
Yeah, done. Obviously it's only really a week and a half.
It's only a week and a half.
2 weeks close to.
It's one of those weird ones.
Yeah, well, obviously, and I say this every year, the busiest week of trade period is actually like the week before it starts. That's when chaos kind of hits.
Yeah.
And you can kind of know what's coming. But a lot of stuff really ramps up in the week before. There's always surprises, and we probably had 2 to 3 that we weren't expecting, and a lot of them popped up in that week. But some even popped up in the trade period that we'll discuss. But I think it was close to 35 players moved clubs, heaps of picks. Obviously,
is that a busy period, or is that compared to others?
It's probably par.
Yeah.
A lot of kind of like fringe players though, like compared to last year's trade period, I don't think we'll see anything like it again.
Yeah.
Just given the caliber of players, the kind of some of the picks, like you look at the top of the draft order last year and like, I think it was like 4 or 5 of the top 6 or 7 picks ended up being, traded and moved. So, and then you had, Brownlow medalists and best and fairest and all Australians flying across, where this year, probably a lot of role players. There was a few bigger names, and then maybe they were through free agency, or some surprising guys like Jack Ginnivan and Taylor Adams and Brodie Grundy. So there's some bigger names in there, but they're not these huge deals that are costing clubs 2 first rounders like we've had before. So it was probably on par. I think we kind of spoke a few months out that whether it was going to be a fizzer or not. And I think maybe some of these late deals like a Jack Billings, a Jack Ginnivan, a Taylor Adams that we didn't see coming are probably the ones that kind of added to the week in a bit. But yeah, a lot of these guys are probably role players that are going to add a bit of depth. And you kind of see that in a bit of a merry-go-round way. Is one club loses a midfielder and thinks, oh, maybe we've got to bring one in. Even though you're just trading future thirds in between. So look, it was obviously quite busy still. It doesn't stop no matter who's up for grabs or how many clubs are getting involved. It's kind of good to get to the end and now focus on the draft a little bit.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, let's dive into it. So we're going to go through every club in alphabetical order. We'll chat about the key ins, the key outs, and what's next for each club. Let's dive in. So first off the rank, obviously Adelaide. Chris Burgess in. Tom Doty, probably the big free agent, the big talking point for Adelaide.
Yeah, so they get pick 20 as compensation. They would have been pretty happy with that. And they did a pretty decent deal to get Burgess in and even increase their draft hand a little bit in that trade with the Gold Coast Suns. So that was pretty promising. So the other player movement for them was Shane McAdam leaving. They lost some picks in the mid-20s, but their draft hand reads as 10, 14, 20. And then if they want a 5th round pick, they've got that at their disposal as well. But 3 picks in the top 20, pick 10 might move back 2 to 3 spots. Pick 14 could move back 3 to 4 spots, and pick 20 could move back 4 to 5 spots. So it's going to be interesting to see how that finishes up. But no, they I think they did quite well to bring in Burgess, so they get some support after losing McAdam, albeit there might be different players in a way. Mm-hmm. They lose Duday, which they probably wanted to keep, but I think they'll be happy with the compensation they get. And then on top of that, James Borlase maybe gets a new deal, given they didn't do too much else to their back line. Elliot Himmelberg was expecting to get a move, but that was only going to come if they could add another forward in, which they didn't. So he'll stay on for another year before he hits free agency. And then I think the Crows also got in Melbourne's future 2nd round pick to add to their 2024 hand, which will help them in next year's draft when they look to get Tyler Welsh in, who's a top-rated father-son prospect. So they'll be looking to move a few picks around potentially before next year gets underway over the coming weeks. Yeah.
So not the biggest names coming in. I have them as a rise up next year to sort of rise up a few spots on the ladder just based on how they went this year, and obviously lost those close ones. They could have been playing finals. So interesting one from Adelaide. Anything else to add on to?
No, I'm with you. I think that they're one of the clubs that should be coming on the up. But at the same time, there's probably half a dozen of the clubs that finished in the bottom 10 that really should be coming up quite strong, whether it's off the back of this trade period or off the back of what we already saw from the season. And they were obviously quite unfortunate not to make finals. So have they improved their list? I don't think so going off their trade plans, but from the, I guess, line that they were already moving on with a young core group was pretty. It should have them in good stead still. There was that frantic 48 hours where they could have got Clayton Oliver, and that would have been quite different. But no, they'll be quite happy, I think, with the outcome of their trade period. Sets them up well for both this year and next year's drafts. And yes, they're a top 8 contender next year as well. So they're like I said, they're in good stead.
Yeah, absolutely. That 48 hours where they almost took Clary, I think, aged me about 10 years. So, all right. So moving on to Brisbane. So key-ins, Tom Doty, obviously, Brandon Ryan, key outs, Tom Fullerton, over to the Ds, and Jack Unston.
Yeah, so they moved on a fair few picks. They were a pretty busy club, Brisbane, in the end, just with some deals here and there, but most of it kind of centered around key position assets. So as you mentioned, Tom Doty in for nothing is a big tick for them.
Yeah.
Big win. He obviously had some good interest from Victoria, and being a Victorian, that's a big coup for them. Just given they're managing to pull a guy who's already interstate into a new state that's not his home. So that's great for him. The Brandon Ryan one was a bit of a shock. Obviously, the Gunston trade request came in, less than a week out from the deadline. So that kind of would have, I think, blindsided all parties involved. And the Lions were smart to kind of just push for Ryan very quickly. They had kind of mentioned they had an eye on him, ahead of this year's mid-season draft. They didn't have a pick for that count, so they might have looked for him then. But when Gunston wants to leave and you've got Tom Fullerton gone, then the Ducks kind of lined up quite nicely. And yeah, I think they get in a really good, cheap, tall forward who can also ruck. He's going to be behind the likes of McInerney, Danaher, Hipwood, and Fort. But there's going to be opportunities for him for sure, I think, at some point next year. He had some good stints across his 3 games. It was really 2.5 games for the Hawks, including 3 goals against Collingwood in round 21. So that's an interesting one. Obviously the Gunston one, couldn't really see that one coming late into the piece, but he got his wish to go back to Hawthorn. It's obviously a bit of a blow for Brisbane given their plans, but they've done well to get Ryan in, and as mentioned, Duday at the other end of the field is going to be quite nice. When they've already got Andrews and Payne and Gardner and Leicester, and they found that McAdam replacement, so that's good. And Fullerton, look, they were pretty open to just parting with him. He didn't really get a look this year. He's kind of in that role will kind of be taken up by Ryan, and he'll have to fight for the spot that Fullerton couldn't quite get either, but. Melbourne do quite well in that, and we'll speak on their trade plans in a little bit. But quite a balanced one for Brisbane. I think they'll be happy with not having to give up all that much, and still kind of balancing out their list nicely after finishing in a grand final. The one that probably isn't mentioned is Devon Robertson and retaining him on a new deal and not losing him to West Coast. So really strengthened their depth. Get a new starter in Tom Doday. So yeah, that's very nice for the Lions, I think.
They do lose a little bit of experience with Gunston going out and then, Rich retiring. But I think they're at that point now where they're just a very strong team and the experience isn't too much of a loss. And Gunston's only been there for a year.
Well, anyway. The Gunston thing's interesting. Like he missed the middle part of the year because of form. So that kind of goes to show that, he wasn't always a best 22 player. Well, that too. But then even by the time the grand final came around and he was actually fit to play, they didn't name him despite him being their most experienced finals player. So that was quite an interesting tale in his first season. And obviously he was keen to get back and he's returned to Waverley. So I think it's all worked out well for all involved in that one. Yeah.
Nice little holiday up north for Gunston. All right, so moving on to Carlton. So Elijah Holland's coming across to join his brother. And then key outs, Zach Fisher, Paddy Dow. So interesting period for Carlton as well.
Yeah, for sure. This was there's a few good trades, I think. The one with Fisher where they kind of packaged him and one of their earlier selections or their earliest selection, and kind of got 2 later ones, but I think they're still second rounders. Or that was a really even deal. I couldn't really figure out who won it, and then I think you kind of just get to the point that it was just a win-win deal all up. North got the player they wanted and got a decent pick back, gave up a couple extra draft picks that they probably might not need given they've got 5 first rounders and now one of them being that Blues one. So that was a really good deal, I think, for both parties. The one that used the term fleeced gets used a fair bit. I think they did really well to get Elijah Hollands for what they did. It was pretty much some straight pick swaps. They might have moved a couple of spots in, but for a player who was a top 10 draft selection 3 years ago, hasn't gotten a great run. He was one of the Suns' best performers in their grand final win over Werribee in the VFL. They've done very well. I think the Blues they don't really have to steady anything, but just to get their business done. Allow Fisher and Dow to both leave, did okay in what they got for both of those guys, and then also do quite well with the Hollands deal. Works in their favour nicely. Their 2024 draft hand will be something they have to place some attention to with Liam Camperelli and Ben Camperelli. Those two boys, potentially first round. I think Liam's probably one of the better players in next year's draft, and Ben not too far behind. So that's going to be really interesting to see how they kind of work themselves for 2024. But they've set themselves up nicely off the back of this trade period. Yeah,
not much to add there. Just, keep the Blues train rolling. So now across to Collingwood. So a bit of action, a lot of surprising action for Collingwood this trade period. So bringing in Lachie Schultz from Fremantle, very good move. I rate Schultz a lot, which I think, pushed that shock Jack Ginnivan trade out, and then obviously losing Taylor Adams as well, which is another big shock early in the period.
Yeah, they weren't supposed to be a busy club, and they were kind of the headliners. They just come off that premiership high and kept themselves in the headlines with these 3 deals. So the Taylor Adams one was a big shock. Like I kind of mentioned to you, it's the week before trade period starts where shit starts to hit the fan. And the Adams one was obviously huge for the Pies. They didn't probably get a heap back in return, but for Adams, probably is still the best 23 player that just didn't feature in the grand final through injury. But an aging player who now gets better opportunities at Sydney. Pies fans were quite happy to bid farewell. They're obviously thankful for his time at the club. It wasn't a good to see you go, but they're very appreciative of what he's done at the club and the position he's gotten them to over the last decade. Then there was the Schultz move, which it sounds like the Pies just did really well to get on top of quite quickly. So there was like a request coming in Sunday night, and it was known publicly by Monday, and the Pies were the ones right in the front of the queue from the get-go. There was supposed to be interest from Hawthorn earlier this year. There was interest from Hawthorn quite strongly, I think, in 2021, and he admitted he actually almost went to the Hawks before re-signing with the Dockers, but it seemed to just be 1 year deal after 1 year deal off the rookie list and stuff that added to the frustrations, and then he wants to come to Victoria. So Collingwood did fantastically well to get access to Lachie Schultz, who I think a lot of people have mentioned is probably one of the better players that's been picked up this trade period. And then the aftermath of that has seen Jack Ginnivan leave. So funnily enough, goes to Hawthorn, who were keen on Schultz. So that's great deal for the Hawks to get Ginnivan in. He's a 40-goal forward. Certainly can be next year. He's 20 years old. He's young. He's got the potential. There's a few knocks on him here and there, but he's exactly what they wanted after losing Tyler Brockman. And the Pies got that future second-round selection from Hawthorn, which you'd think might be early 20s, probably mid-20s. After there'll be more father-son and academy bidding next year. So and plus North Melbourne's 2 compensation picks, so that's like a mid-20s pick. Collingwood fans will be very happy. They lose Ginnivan, but they had Schultz come through. They lost Adams, but they've got guys like McRae and Ed Allen that are knocking on the door. So they're well set for a premiership defence next year.
Yeah, Ginnivan's going to be one to watch. We'll get into that when we get to Hawthorn. So. Let's move across to Essendon. So a lot of free agents for the Dons. So they signed Goldstein, Mackay, and Gresham. And then late in with Dersma, which is very surprising. And then the Zerk Thatcher and Ambrosio deals got done quite late. Yeah,
probably the busiest club. Maybe not from a trade perspective, but obviously free agency, they got some stuff done quite early. Yeah, first day of trade period, they got their free agency business all lined up nice and quickly. So Goldstein and Mackay joined quite early, and they eventually got Gresham done. And then literally in the final, 10 minutes of trade period, got that Zerk Thatcher Dersma deal. They wanted a straight swap. I didn't think they were ever going to get that. There was no way Port was going to allow that to happen. So they gave up, I think, 3 really late picks, which, they might not have used. So that's great for the power. But in this trade, they get Xavier Dersma in, who's got plenty of upside. Certainly a more valued player than Brandon Zerk-Thatch, you'd think. Was only drafted 5 years ago out of the first round. And it'd be interesting to see how he kind of complements that midfield mix on the wing or at half forward when they've got guys like Archie Perkins, Sam Durham, Nick Martin kind of floating around. Dylan Shield stays at the Bombers, so that was kind of an interesting one to keep an eye on throughout. But they'll hold on to him. Goldstein, I think we'll be seeing minutes next year. I think they want 2 rucks, and I think ideally they want to be playing Draper and Bryan. But Goldstein's a great supporting option, or he might be that second in line ahead of Bryan if they think
Have they said how long his contract is?
I think it's just the 1 year.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty short deal, whereas Mackay and Gresham are on much longer deals with obviously much more money. We've talked about both Mackay and Gresham a fair bit on this show, and just how well they can help the Bombers, but just at the same time, how much they could also put them in a bit of a strangle if things don't go their way, given the money they're on. But no, I think Mackay is going to flourish in an environment where he's surrounded by some other decent defenders. And then Gresham as well. It's going to be interesting to see how they use him. If it's more of a permanent forward, I don't think he's going to be very far up the queue for midfield minutes under Brad Scott next year, especially when they add in someone like Dersma. Zerk-Thatcher, yes, it's a loss, but they had Mackay coming in, so I think they'll be happy with that change. And then D'Ambrosio, they will be quite happy in the end, just given he could have easily walked to delisted free agency. Instead, they got 2 picks in return for him. So I think they'll be quite happy with how that one turned out. So yeah, that was a good off season for the Bombers. They wanted to be aggressive. They were aggressive, and it sounds like they're still well prepared to add to their list next year if they need to. They've got their first round pick, which is in the top 10 for this year's draft. They're well placed. It's just going to be really interesting to see what level a Mackay and a Gresham can go to. If they do hit their potential, then it's going to bode very well for the Bombers.
Yeah, classic Essendon off season. I think they sign a lot of big names and then see how it all plays out. And last off season for Dodoro.
Yeah, he'll be floating around a little bit, but Matt Rosa kind of takes the keys now.
Yeah.
He'll be still helping, advising, mentoring in a way. He's the longest serving list manager around. He's got
and the most famous, I think.
He is. I think he's a face that kind of drives clicks for a lot of people, and you either love him or you hate him. And that's even Bombers supporters as well. Like Bombers supporters either love him or hate him. But no, he's obviously done a pretty decent job, and to be in a role for that long, you are doing something right. So it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of work through things over the next few years for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so moving over to the West. So Fremantle, not a huge amount of key ins, but a lot of key outs. So they lost Hamling, Schultz, obviously, and Liam Henry, and they've gained some future first round picks.
Yeah, they can't be happy.
Yeah.
I don't think. You look at the future firsts, and that's great having 3 for next year, but they can't be happy with how well they finished last year, to then trade their future first, bomb out this year, not have that pick, and not have access to the draft, until, I think they enter at pick 34. They've got, 4 picks between 34 and 64, so they'll have some access. They could trade up in the draft. And a few of those picks, given that a lot of them are behind, a lot of the Gold Coast Suns picks, which will kind of get dissolved, so they will move up a little bit already. So they have 34, 46, 60, and 64. So 34 might come in a little, but 46, 60, and 64 should come in a fair bit on draft night. And then, I don't know. They're obviously very frustrated. They wanted to keep all 3 of Henry, Schultz, and Hamling. Hamling's not a huge loss for them. They've got some really good key defensive stocks, but if they lose one, then it might open up a little bit there. They've got some young players that can play key back, but whether they're ready next year, especially if Fremantle think they're back in premiership or finals contention, then that's going to be interesting to watch. Lockie Schultz is a huge blow for the leading goal kicker for the club across the last 3 seasons. Look, they've got guys in Switkowski. They've got guys in Frederick, and Walters has got another year or 2 to go. So it's not like it's the be-all and end-all for their small forwards, but they'll be quite frustrated with that loss. Liam Henry's another one as well, can play small forward. Really came to his own in the second half of this year. So yeah, they can't be happy with losing all three and then not bringing anyone in. I think they'll look at Jeremy Sharp as a delisted free agent. They haven't really said they're looking at him yet, but I think given, if they want to add to their list and someone they were after last year, he'll certainly be one on their radar, I believe. But yeah, 3 first-round picks for next year. So one's Collingwood's and one's Port's, and the other one's their own. So best case scenario, Port kind of bomb out like they did last year. I don't see the Pies falling out of the top 8, but if they finish in the the bottom half of the 8, that's great. And then Freo, that it's kind of how the draft works. If you finish low, then you've got a great pick, and if you finish high, then you're playing great footy. So it sets them up for maybe a move for someone like Logan McDonald. If they want to go for a Tim English and they have to trade for him in the end, he is a free agent next year, but they can force into a trade, then they might have the stock to do that. And then on top of that, if they lose Sean Darcy, they'll add to that draft hand. He's a free agent as well, but albeit likely restricted. So they'll have a fair bit to use next year. They don't have draft access this year though, so that's going to be quite frustrating for them. But like I said, they can trade a few picks to get to the front of the queue or get up a little bit, but they might be a bit quieter on come the draft. But
I didn't think that their issues this year were solely list related, but the fact that they didn't add anyone and they lost those 3 is quite quite disappointing.
I don't know. I feel like if they finished where they did in 23 last year. Then a lot of people would have expected them to do really well like they did last year this year. So they kind of took a step back, but maybe last year was maybe a bit of an overachieving year. They've got a great list. Yeah. And it's young and it's emerging.
The spine's good.
Yeah. And they're well placed. If they lose someone like Sean Darcy, they'll get heaps in return.
Yeah.
And they can move Luke Jackson to that first string ruck role. Or if they keep him, then they've got the best ruck pair going forward for the next umpteen years when they sign Darcy. So yeah, that'll be good for them. But yeah, I think this offseason certainly hurt. They wouldn't have seen the Schultz stuff coming. They did okay, I think, to get Collingwood's future first round. Really the Pies, all they have to do is finish, below first, and Freo kind of get a win, given they didn't get their first round for this year in, so that's okay. I can't see the Freo being very happy with how this year unfolded for them.
Yeah. All right. So moving over to Geelong, another sort of quiet on the ins front, but obviously the big name for them, the key out is Asava Radigaleo, which got done late-ish as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought it was going to go right down to the wire. It got done a couple hours out from the deadline, and the Cats...
Well, they knocked back the first offer, didn't they?
Well, yeah, I think pick 25 was offered. A lot of people thought it was overs for Radigaleo. Geelong seemed to think it was well under. So they got like pick 76 and 94 back, so an actual 5th round.
94.
It was the only 5th round pick that was traded the whole trade period. The 25 is a great get for them. They'll be pretty happy with that. They wanted to keep Radigaleo, obviously, but they've got plenty of key defenders that I think they can work with. And he wasn't always a best 23 player this year as well, mind you. So they get 25 in. That adds to their pick 8. Then they've got that 4th round and 5th round that they also picked up. So like picks 94 and 76, some people might think, there's only going to be 50 or 60 players drafted this year. But those picks will come in after some bidding. So 94 can end up in the 60s or 70s, and 76 could end up in the 50s or 60s, because once Gold Coast have to match a bid, get rid of all the draft picks that they've stocked up, those 5 or 6 picks dissolve and everyone moves forward. So that's how the draft kind of works. It's shuffling back first when bids come in, clubs get to move forward, but then when they move forward, the later picks kind of come in because those picks that they have to use to match the bid dissolve. So pick 94, if Geelong use it, it could be in the 70s or even in the 60s.
Yeah. There you go. I didn't know that's how it worked.
Well, yeah, because that's kind of...
I was thinking that I might be able to get a game. I might be able to get drafted at 94.
There'd be a good chance if there's 94 players picked. That's the thing. It could be the only 5th round selection that's used, given, there might be some clubs with enough list spots that they want to draft, 5, 6 players if they've got one in each round. But yeah, like I said, they knew the Radigaleo was going to leave. They got a pretty decent return. I think they can only be happy.
Yeah,
didn't bring anyone in, but they're backing in their list, which is going to be interesting.
Yeah. All right. So moving over to the Gold Coast. So a lot of A lot of outs. They lost Mabio Chol, Chris Burgess, Elijah Hollands, obviously, and then just picks in return.
Yeah, interesting one. Obviously, a key play for them was getting rid of pick 4, which ended up being pick 5, and then they split what they got from that into, I think they got pick like 11 and pick 17/18. They moved those picks on quite nicely, so split the middle selection. Or the earliest selection, into more later picks, like second and third round picks. They moved that, late first round pick to North Melbourne and got North's, future first round pick. So that kind of broke even a little bit, but it just means they have picks for next year, a nice pick for next year. So that pick, along with their own first rounder and the Western Bulldogs first rounder, sets them up with 3 opening round picks for 2024.
So they're set now for those
academy kids.
Kids.
They've got heaps of points. It's unless the bids come in really early for all 3. Like if Walter goes at pick 2, Reed goes at pick 6, and Rogers goes at pick 10, it's going to cost them a fair bit. But I think they've got close to 4,000 draft points.
Yep.
And it can go into deficit or they can trade back in. Will Graham's the other one that might get a bid, but that might come quite late into the draft or via the rookie draft afterwards. So, yeah, they did what they needed to from a draft perspective. They might have lost, some... They probably would have only gained points from doing the trades for, Hollands and Scholl and Burgess. But, overall, I think, they were concerned with the idea of losing those 3 guys. I think Hollands is going to bite them in the butt a little bit. But their midfield's so good already with kind of the emerging names they've got through. Plus, Jake Rogers will add to that midfield in time. Next year, they'll get Leonardo Lombard, who's one of the top-rated midfielders. So that they've kind of got a decent succession plan from. And by the time Matt Rowell's hitting his peak, and by Noah Anderson's probably already hitting that, given the year he had. But by the time these guys are 26 to 27, they've got these really good young midfielders also ready to go and chomping at the bit. So that's going to be interesting. Burgess, I guess they were happy to lose along with Chol. I think it does open them up a little bit too much. They also got rid of McLaughlin. So they got rid of the two best VFL forwards for not a lot in return. They also lose Mabio Chol, who kicked 44 goals in the AFL last year. So they're obviously relying a heap on Ben King next year, hoping he stays fit. And then on top of that, hoping he re-signs. Because if he doesn't, then really it's all just going to be placed on Jed Walter, who's going to be, in his first year next year. Yeah. Like Levi Casbolt's there, but he's not going to be around forever. And if Ben King leaves, then all they've got is Walter for a list that where everywhere else across the ground is really at a competing level and a win now level. So it's going to be interesting to see how their forward line kind of stacks up over the next few years. And and the King is the big one. He's going to have some stupid offers come his way next year. And if they can somehow retain him, I think that's the difference, because they go from a forward line that has a lot of pieces, decent pieces around King to, all of a sudden it's just Walter potentially, who is one of the, best key forwards we've had come through the draft in some time. But in saying that, he's, a first year player next year, and potentially a required player at AFL level, which is going to be interesting. He's one of the most ready-made prospects in this year's count, but you can only do so much when you're a first year player.
I mean, I think sitting where they're at with Damien Hardwick coming in, they look like they're at a pretty optimistic point at their development.
They do have to be.
Yeah.
But I think things will work out quite well, and they're among those, I think, half dozen clubs we mentioned earlier that didn't finish in the top 8 that certainly could next year.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's a good look in. So let's move over to the Giants. So again, similar to Geelong, not a whole lot of movement. They just lose Matt Flynn to free agency. He's gone over to West Coast, and they got pick 43 as compensation. Yeah,
it was a quiet period for them, and that move happened, I think, day 1 or in the first week of free agency or day 1 of free agency. Pick 43 was nice compensation for a player that they definitely didn't need, and they re-signed Braden Pruce, so he'll support Kieran Briggs, and they got Madden as well as that third string ruckman, so they're all fine on the ruck front. Happy to deal Matt Flynn away. It doesn't look like he was going to get offered a new deal anyway, or it was between him and Pruce, so that's good for them. Added to their draft hand nicely. It sounds like they'll sign Orazio Fantasia as a maybe delisted free agent or rookie draft signing, so that'll add to their forward line, a bit of pace. Interesting to see how deep forward he'll play. Like, they've got Bedford and Daniels who they can, play at half forward and up the ground. But Orazio Fantasia used to play backline a little bit and could, play up on the wing maybe. So he'll offer some leg speed if he can stay fit. That'll be great. They wanted Elliot Himmelberg, didn't get him. It was funny, when they asked, they said that they were interested in him probably midway through the year. So I wonder if it was part of, re-signing Harry to a long-term deal was, hey, we'll try and get your brother to the club as well, just to kind of keep you here. But it hasn't been the case, obviously. Harry re-signed, and obviously Elliot was hopeful of getting over, but Adelaide needed to bring in another forward, and that didn't quite come to be. So, yeah, a quiet one for GWS, but they have 2 first-rounders for this year, one of them quite early, but given it was Richmond's pick, so they're well set up to go to the draft again. Mm-hmm. Probably can't make a
their list is in a good spot as well anyway.
Yeah, they made a prelim. They could make a play for pick 1. I don't think they have enough, just given that how well they finished this year. Like that first round pick just falls quite back in the draft, and Richmond obviously played quite poorly, so they've kind of got that top 6-7 pick and a later first round pick, which combined with their future first probably isn't enough for pick 1. But if they did bomb out a little bit, then they would have had maybe 2 top 6 or 7 picks along with their future first, and that might have done it. So, yeah, we'll see how they go at the draft. It's going to be quite interesting.
Yeah, quite one for the Giants. Moving over to the Hawks, who were quite busy. Probably one of the busier ones. So, obviously, we spoke about before, Ginnivan coming in, massive, D'Ambrosio, Chol, and Gunston returning, and then key out Tyler Brockman, which is a big one, Brandon Ryan, and Kajitsky as well.
Yeah, so 6 of those 7 guys were done on deadline day. It was a busy day for Mark McKenzie. They got the Ginnivan stuff done quite early, which was a stellar effort just given the turnaround.
Yeah, it happened really quickly. Yeah, as it was announced.
They've been linked to him kind of for a fair bit this year, just given if there was some unrest and he wasn't in the best 22 at times. So and
we've all seen the photos of him as a little kid.
That works too. I think clubs do have to kind of keep track of if there are players out there that support your club, you want to know who they are. Mm-hmm. Whether that played a big part in this or not remains to be seen. But now, great get for them after losing Brockman. They gave up a future second. They did that last year for someone like Josh Weddle, and it's paid off. So that they'll be very happy with bringing him in. And as mentioned earlier, he could be kicking 40+ goals next year if he's getting a good look at it. And then, again, one of those clubs that can really be pushing for a top 8 return. Massimo D'Ambrosio is a great little, addition. Mm-hmm. Certainly a good role player, versatile, utility player, can play off halfback, nice left foot, can play up the wing, can hit the scoreboard. So it'll be interesting to see. He's probably not a best 22 player for them, but I think he can certainly press his case to be. Marbio Chol will partner with Mitch Lewis, and then Jack Gunston's in there as well. So what that means for Fergus Green is going to be interesting. Like, they lose Kajitsky and they lose Brandon Ryan, but they get Gunston and Chol, and Gunston's 31, 32 years of age. So, does Fergus Green get a new deal? I'd like to hope so. I do like Fergus Green. Probably just didn't have the season he had hoped for in his return. It was very busy. They lose Brockman, probably wanted to keep him, but they get Ginnivan, that's a tick. They lose Ryan, but they got Gunston. I don't really see that as a win for them, but it was just business that had to be done. Chol's in though, and that was kind of a part of a deal that I think what worked in with Brisbane for the Ryan deal. So they kind of did okay out of that. And then Kajitsky, they got a top 50 pick for, which I think is a pretty decent return. So they'll be happy. Added some nice pieces. Probably I don't think Chol's the player that they would really want, but they do need some support for Mitch Lewis.
Yeah.
Next year's going to be interesting. There's some good key forwards up for grabs, and I think they'll have a fair bit of coin saved for some of those targets.
Yeah. Given this trade period, I'm now sort of expecting them to push further next year than I probably was beforehand. Probably middle six for next year, I reckon. All right, moving over to the Ds, who were also quite busy. So Shane McAdam came over from Adelaide. We got Tom Fullerton, Jack Billings, which is pretty surprising. And then we traded up to pick 11. And then James Jordan, we lose. So I keep saying we, but I'm a D supporter. Fred and to Sydney. Harms and Brody Grundy also go to Sydney. Harms still has some Bulldogs.
I think they might have wanted to get more from the Grundy deal. Like, they gave up, I think it was a pick in the mid-20s last year to Collingwood, but what they got from Sydney, they moved on to get McAdam and Fullerton in. So Fullerton isn't a like-for-like replacement, but he's a player that actually can play forward as much as he can play ruck, which is something that they tested Grundy with, and it probably just didn't work.
Yep.
I like the Fullerton pickup. I think he's going to be quite handy for them if he gets a look, or at least he'll press his case quite nicely at VFL level. Shane McAdam should be a starting forward for them. I'm a big fan, and you lose your kind of chances when you get Rochelle and Rankin ahead of you. That's fair enough, and he can offer a fair bit. He's 28 though, so he's in the peak of his time. So they're not going to get a whole lot of juice to squeeze. But if they're in a premiership window again, if they're competing again, he can be a nice difference maker in that attacking third. Billings, I think, is an astute pickup, just given that they lost Jordan and lost Harms, and you kind of looked at their midfield and thought, well, yes, they got Oliver and they got Petrarca, and you had Viney to that, and it's fantastic. And they can probably bring Brayshaw in a little bit, and then Sparrow is probably that fifth guy. But they were relying on Jordan and Harms a lot this year, especially when Clary's out for 12 weeks. When Brayshaw's maybe needing to play on the wing or at the flank. So just someone that can run through the middle. And they've got a few other guys that certainly can do that. Like they can throw Cozzy in there, Neil Bullen, and a few others. Yeah, Woden. He's going to be a pretty interesting one to watch as well. Bailey Laurie can play further up the field. So, I don't know, it's a good chance for Jack Billings. Sounds like the Saints are paying a fair portion of his contract anyway. So nice and cheap, didn't cost them much. Future third round pick. Jordan loss, I think it's a great move for James Jordan. I think the D's might have wanted to keep him, but we're probably just resigned to the idea of losing him quite early. And they got some nice compo back for him. James Harm's another one. They were kind of open to just allowing him to look around, and the Bulldogs might be a good home for him. And then the Grundy deal, they admitted failed experiment. That's cool. Move on.
Didn't work
Get
out.
someone in. We can rely on Max again, and kind of gets them a bit more focused. It was obviously a very big distraction for them. Not even like in the second half of the year, just through from round one, as good as they were playing, even at the best of times, it was a very big distraction. And then, as you mentioned, they move up to pick 1, so they pick 11. Sorry, so they've got pick. Yeah, it'd be nice.
Would love pick 1.
Well, they certainly could. Like they've got pick 6, pick 11, their future first. Again, is that enough for pick 1? Probably not. Just given what North Melbourne can offer, which we'll talk about in a sec, but they can at least make a move up the draft order, which they want to do. They might be able to trade with a Hawthorn or trade with the North Melbourne and get themselves into pick 3 or pick 4. So that'll be interesting to see what they do. But if not, they come away with 3 first round picks for this year and next, and they're pretty well set up. So it's they're in a good window. Just going to see if their list actually improves off their trade deals from this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I'm pretty optimistic now, given that we bombed out by less than a goal. So adding these parts, we do lose a bit of depth. Billings is an interesting one. We did do a very good video last week about why clubs weren't chasing Jack Billings, based on an article by Ed Carmine. So that's a good one to check out, to look at the sort of industry's perspective on him before he got traded to Melbourne, and see how hopefully that one works out. So interesting stuff. So let's move over to North Melbourne. Keans, Dylan Stevens, Zach Fisher. They were pretty busy. Big Nguyen, Toby Pink, and pick 3. Kiaz, obviously, Makata, free agency, and pick 22 to Carlton.
Yeah. People always talk like, did you win trade period or did you lose trade period? I think North, I don't like using the words win or lose, but they won the second they got pick 3 through the door.
Yeah.
That was huge.
Unbelievable.
On top of the assistance package that pretty much got them Fisher and Stevens. That was ace. Like they just worked so well in the end to set themselves up for the draft. Obviously, yes, some help from the AFL and some help from compensation, but they've got picks 2 and 3 now. They can make a play. They can get pick 1. Like if West Coast aren't setting a price, and that's a great idea, but North Melbourne have more than enough. I don't think they would want to give up 2 and 3 though.
Yeah.
Like you go back through the drafts over the last 10 to 15 years, and more times than not, you're taking 2 and 3 over 1. Sometimes you'll get a bust at 2 or 3, but there's a very good chance that the combination of 2 players in the top 3 is a lot better than the guy that went ahead of them. It doesn't happen very often. Like you look at 2018 is a good one. Like would you take
Anderson Rowell or
no? Would you take Sam Walsh or would you take Lukosius and Rankin?
Yeah.
Like that's 3 really great players, and I think you take the 2 guys the Suns picked up. And there's not a lot that really work out well for the club. That actually, if you're putting in yourself in that position, but yeah, I'd be shocked if pick 2 and 3 are on the table for pick 1, as great as Harley Reid is. But North have 5 first rounders this year and their own first round next year, which again is likely to be a top 5 pick. So they have more than enough to satisfy West Coast. It's just a matter of how much they want to give up. But yeah, the player as well, Dylan Stephens is going to be really good. Top 5 or 6 pick, from 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Zach Fisher's a great player who's shown his versatility this year and just couldn't get a look in. Big and Ewan, I'm not really sure about. Maybe it's just some defensive coverage or ruck coverage with a player who might have some upside and didn't really cost them much. Toby Pink was delisted free agency, so someone they really liked, who's the Sample Player of the Year for Glenelg this year, was at the Swans list 3 or 4 years ago. Just couldn't quite get a look in, so interesting to see what they can get out of him. And then the outs, so Mackay, yeah, they're okay with that, given they got pick 3 in return. So that's fine, and they're moving to get some key defenders, or they've moved to get some key defenders through the door. And yeah, they set themselves up with 5 first rounders. They're flying. They've got like 8,000 points in draft points. Not that it's a huge deal for them, because they're not really matching bids or getting father-son guys in the door, but just sets them up nicely. So picks 2, 3, 15, 17, 18, and a third rounder and a fourth rounder to come as well. So yeah, no, they'll be very happy with the outcome of the off season. Yeah,
interesting one to watch. I still need to know how those herbs and spices work out for compensation down at AFL House. It's one of the mysteries of the universe. All right, so moving over to Port Adelaide, who are also very busy, and they were busy late. So key ins, Ivan Soldo from Richmond, Jordan Sweet, Asava Radigalia, obviously pick 25, and then key outs, Dersma, Fantasia, and future first round. So
yeah, well, the key pick 25 was technically in and out, so they got it in,
right?
But like, to be fair, they moved to get it in using their future first round, and then used it to get Radigalia.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the kind of, they had to make a lot of moves before they could actually make the moves they wanted to. And Soldo was kind of a part of that as well. Like, he, out of the 4 guys they were chasing, he was the only contracted one. So like, if they wanted to get him done, they probably just wanted to get that out of the way at some point. And they got all 4 done on deadline day. Jordan Sweet, I think, is a great pickup alongside Soldo. So Scott Lyssette's probably leaving the club. Same with Sam Hayes. And what they bring in is 2 ruckmen who are really ready to prove themselves at the senior level. Like, Sweet's been stuck behind Tim English, easily the best VFL ruckman this year. And Soldo's similar, just been stuck behind Toby Nankervis. Had a chance this year when Nankervis was suspended and really showed his worth. So whether they're going for 2 rucks, I wouldn't have thought so, just given the tall offers they've got elsewhere and someone like Jeremy Finlayson hanging around. But it's going to be interesting to see who starts round 1. I would not be ruling out Jordan Sweet from a round 1 start at all. I think he's going to really look forward to the opportunity that is potentially, leading a midfield of Butters and Rosie. And Soldo's, he looks like a very motivated player as well.
Mm-hmm. Sweet's younger than Soldo, isn't he?
They're similar.
Yeah.
They're kind of mature age, 24, 25, 26 areas. But yeah, obviously from an experience point of view, Soldo's got a lot more on him, including premiership experience. Radical is obviously a big one for them. They'll be quite happy with adding him and Brandon Zerk-Thatcher through the door. Certainly helps the likes of Alir and the rest of their kind of backline group. Like, they've definitely needed tools. Tom Jonas and Tom Cleary just weren't the players to help lead them off this year. And I don't think they're going to be a huge difference. But if they can reach some of the upside and, they're not, taking the best, key forward, and Alir is certainly helping with some intercept work, then, Ken Hinkley's got a really good back line to go with an awesome midfield and a lethal forward line. So they could be quite set to kind of bounce back from that straight sets exit. Key outs, Dersman's kind of a disappointing one. Obviously,
that was a surprise to me.
They had to give up a player if they wanted to bring in all 4.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like they were actually pretty happy or open to parting with Dersma. He was unsigned next year. Maybe they kind of got a feel that there's a chance he was going to leave in 12 months' time anyway, and kind of cash in a little bit. They did well out of that deal, to be fair, and he was certainly worth more than Zerk-Thatcher was in what was potentially going to be a player-for-player swap in Essendon's eyes. But they got like 3 picks, albeit late. They got 3 picks in that one. They might lose Fantasia. That's kind of their decision though. He's unsigned, and they'll probably just won't be offering him a contract. They get rid of their future first, which, they want to be pressing quite nicely up again there this year. And if they, I think, finish in the top 6, then that's probably a win deal for them, because it got them pick 25 to get Radicalier, and it got them another future pick that I think worked in one of their other deals. So, they cashed in a little bit there, but they'll be backing themselves in. It's kind of that extra motivation.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so moving over to Richmond. Pretty quiet. They said as much on trade launch, so they'll be pretty quiet this period, but they did bring in Kajitsky from Hawks, and then they lose, obviously, Soldo and Biggie.
Yeah, the Kajitsky one, he doesn't really jump off the page for me. But he's what they need. They need key forwards around Tom Lynch. Samson Ryan will probably be getting a fair bit of a start next year. Jacob Bauer, is he one that they'll kind of look at as a forward target a bit more? But yeah, Kajitsky can be good. I'm just, he's got a lot of unproven time left. So it's going to be interesting to see how much they get out of him. Mm-hmm. Probably something we didn't mention with Port Adelaide was how much the Power actually gave up to get Soldo in. I think Richmond did quite nicely to give up a fringe ruckman and get what they got back in that deal. Biggie Newen, he's played one game. I think they're okay for key defenders with guys like Josh Gibkiss coming through. They're just obviously hoping that he stays fit. So yeah, it wasn't a busy period. One player in, two players out. They don't have a first round pick to deal with, obviously. So it's kind of going to be a quieter off season again heading into the draft. But I don't think they've improved their list. And for a team that was bottom 5, bottom 6, I don't see them coming back up next year either.
Yeah, either do I. It's interesting to see. It'll be interesting to hear from Uze, I think, coming into the preseason, just what he's inheriting. Because they were busy last year with Hopper and Taranto coming in. But yeah, they're in an interesting spot list wise.
Yeah, I think they could have done more, but they didn't really have a lot to work with either.
Yeah. Absolutely. So pretty quiet for Richmond. So let's move over to St Kilda. They brought in Liam Henry, Paddy Dow, and they got pick 21 because they lost Jade Gresham to free agency, and then Billings and Nick Caulfield.
Yeah, they I think they'll be kind of happy in some aspects. Not giving up their pick 13 or pick 21 for Liam Henry is a big tick. Nicely done. I think Freo were definitely going to be asking, well, they were asking for a first round pick. It seemed like it was a non-negotiable, and then they just folded and got a second rounder, and they swapped fourths next year. So
fleeced, I think is the word.
Yeah, fleeced. So they did very well, I think, out of that trade. The Paddy Dow trade, it's kind of looked like they lost in a way. Just got Dow in, got rid of Caulfield, and they seemed like they lost from the draft selection movement. But it wasn't like a deal that included future seconds and top picks. It was kind of it was a busy deal, but it wasn't like a mega deal in any language. The Gresham loss, they'll be happy they got a first round compo back. I don't think he's a huge loss for them. He can be a good player, but they've got some nice guys coming through to the system anyway, and they get a first round pick for him. It puts him in a position to potentially move up the draft order, which was what Ross Lyon kind of wants. They're on that pick 13 barrier, and right on that line is where probably the talent starts to fall off, especially when it gets pushed back 3 or 4 spots. So if they can, I think they should try and push up the order a little bit. Geelong's picks probably are up for grabs, pick 8. Whether the Cats would take 13 and 21 for 8, maybe. Just depends, because the Cats are in that line of top 10 or 11 picks. They're going to have access to one of the top guys of the draft, whereas it does drop off quite quickly around when the Saints enter. So that'll be one to watch. Jack Billings, if they're paying a fair bit of his contract, but he's not really a player that they needed at all this year. Same with Gresham.
They seemed happy to lose both Gresham and Billings, and I think they were both happy to go. They just seemed both players of that ilk that just needed a fresh start somewhere else. Because they were both drafted to Saints, and it just hasn't worked out. Yeah, and
Caulfield as well. He hasn't played since 2021, just given injuries. So they, like I said, they didn't get much out of that deal other than Dow, but they'll be hoping he plays, he gets back into his footy. So I think it's probably most of its centers on getting pick 1 and Liam Henry in. And they've done quite nicely out of that. And Paddy Dow's, I think, still got some time to prove himself. At AFL level.
Well, he's another one of those guys that just seems like a fresh club will do it really well.
For sure. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Just a lot of that attention off him now. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very loud Carlton supporters. All right, moving over. We've got 3 left. So Sydney. So key-ins, obviously they were very busy as well. It's not a bad list, the ins that they've got. So they brought in Jordan, Hamling, Taylor Adams, Brodie Grundy, and then key out Dylan Stevens. I think they've done fairly well there.
Yeah. Again, don't want to use the winners, losers thing, but big winners. Yeah, they did fantastically well. They obviously get Jordan and Hamling in, who, again, these are just like these role players who they need. They probably just wanted some, extra leg speed in midfield. They want some, support for their key defenders after losing Paddy McCartan and kind of already needing one on top of him anyway. So Hamling just brings some experience. Hopefully he can stay fit. But it's Adams and Grundy that they didn't have to give up much for.
Yeah.
We kind of mentioned throughout the year that they really needed that in under midfielder that Adam, and that's something that Adams can be. Like we spoke about, I think like a Jack Graham, when Clary's name popped up, like Sydney were the ones that, if they could get him, like that was just perfect for them. Mm-hmm. So Adams, he's not going to be probably on the level of a Clary, but he can certainly help, feed the ball to Goulden and Warner. Work defensively with Robon in midfield. And then
Jordan can play that role a little bit too.
Yeah, he can. He can play inside and outside. So he's going to be quite an interesting one to see how they use him. And all those guys now working at the feet of Brodie Grundy, who, I was thinking this on the way into work today, All Australian Smokey, if I'll say it now.
It is.
Hopefully,
October, 18th?
Yeah.
It's early. All right, yeah.
The ruck spot's always hard because it's one.
Yeah.
Maybe a squad.
That's 2, yeah.
Squad member.
Bench.
I don't do that too much anymore. Maybe a squad. But I honestly think that he could, he could be back to his best.
Yeah.
In the right, just in the
Playing
right environment.
week.
In the right environment is obviously what he needs to be in. And he had some great performances for Melbourne this year. Some when Gorn was out. So...
And he honestly had a couple when Gorn was in too.
He did. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when it's his own, it's gonna be hopefully.
Yeah. He's not going to have to push into the forward line.
So when you talk about clubs improving their list, Sydney did that very, very clearly. They lose Stevens, they get Jordan in. Stevens is a bit of a blow, but I think they got an okay return. Like it was a kind of an interesting deal with North Melbourne for that one. But no, the Swans have significantly improved their list after a finals finishing season. So they could be back in the frame.
Yeah, they always seem to do surprisingly well in off-season. All right, so a couple more to go. Let's move over to West Coast. So key-ins, obviously we spoke about Matt Flynn, Tyler Brockman. Key outs?
Nada.
Yeah, nothing there.
No, yeah, they lost like 8 or 9 guys to retirement and delistings. So they had like a lot of openings already. They've still got a few guys who are unsigned that might get delisted, but no trades or anything. So I think like it didn't seem like anyone was on the way out anyway. Got Flynn in, big tick. Got Brockman in. That's a huge get, I think. I think he's going to be stellar for them. Didn't get Dev Robinson. I don't think they're that fussed about it. They'll probably just move for him in 2 years' time when he's off contract again. But all focus is now on pick one. Like it seemed pretty obvious over the last maybe few days that pick one wasn't getting traded this week, and maybe it could be next week or on draft night. I've said all season that they should be trading pick one. It's not just like the Harley Reids of Victorian thing. It's the speed up your rebuild. They did it last year. They split their picks. They got Hewitt and Jimby in, and it worked really well for them over the year we saw. And just do it again. Like it doesn't have to be local kids. Like you can still probably get Dan Curtin in with a trade that splits pick one, but it's just about getting more than one player. Like Reed's great. He's going to be a poster boy for wherever he goes. Mm-hmm. And I do believe he'll live up to expectations. Like he's a superstar.
He's everywhere at the moment.
But like it's going to be like when I say expectations, I'm not saying he's just going to win like 3 Brownlows like everyone's kind of calling him, but like he is just one of the more talented all-round draft prospects we've had come through in the last decade. Yeah. And it just looks like he'll fit in really well at an experience level as early as next year. But I just think, just split your pick, bring in 3 to 4 guys. If you can get North Melbourne's pick 3, maybe it's their future first, and you wait an extra year and you bank a couple of first round picks next year, and you try and get another one of their first rounders, like pick 14 or 15 or whatever it is now. And you just get in some good talent. or they get North's future in and then maybe trade that and getting back into the queue with Hawthorn or something. So they've got a lot they can work with, and if they do trade pick one, they're going to get a pretty decent offer in return, which is all they're waiting for. They're not setting a price; they just want offers to come their way, and if one tickles their fancy, then they'll jump at it. But they want to be blown out of the water. It's not just going to be that could work. They want to be blown out of the water, and there's only one club that can do that, and that's North Melbourne.
Yep.
Now that we're past the player movement phase, like if there's only one club with picks, it's North Melbourne. So really the business for them starts now, and seeing what happens with pick one.
Yeah, very interesting. All right, so moving on to the final team, a Western Bulldogs. So key ins, James Harms, Nick Caulfield, pick 5, key outs, Jordan Sweet, and pick 11. So
I like
busy
the Harms.
enough.
Yeah, I like the Harms pickup. They like delisted Toby McLean. They've got guys like McNeil or Vandermeer or some of the other guys.
Losing Dunkley last year.
Yeah, they kind of just have these guys that still float through midfield. Even as good as their midfield group is, they still have these guys that are probably those bottom 6 or so players, or even maybe, are only playing because other players are injured. So Harms is a player that is reliable. I think he's not, winning your games, but if you just need someone to go to 2 to 3 centre bounces here and there, or, just body on a opposing midfielder that's kind of getting a lot of the ball, he can do that. Nick Caulfield, I'd like to think he's got his best foot. He's still ahead of him. Can be a nice medium-sized defender and will work well alongside the likes of Bailey Dale and Caleb Daniel. And then they get themselves pretty early into the draft. They traded away the right picks, like the future first round pick could bite them on the ass, but if they believe in they're making their way straight back up the ladder, that should work out quite nicely for them because they get an early draft selection in pick 5 anyway. So maybe it's a Nick Watson. I don't think Dersman would be available. So, and maybe it's a midfield like a Riley Sanders because they definitely don't need any key position guys. And then, then they get Jordan Croft in anyway, who's a key forward as a father-son. So that's why they had to clear out those kind of that later first round pick from Brisbane. So they've done quite well to kind of get themselves nicely positioned for the draft. They've got a contending list. It's just underperforming. They lose Jordan Sweet, who they didn't really rely on this year. They've got Tim English and Rory Lobb. They'll probably add a ruckman, whether that's through the draft or through other means. But they'll probably need someone that like Sweet, has maybe some experience, like a Scott Lysett, Sam Hayes type. But yeah, it's an all right window for them. They did what they needed to, I guess. They got the Sweet deal done, got an okay pick back, got Caulfield through the door, added some midfield depth, swapped their draft picks around, so now that they can get someone else ahead of Jordan Croft in the draft. So it's all good.
Yeah. So it should be challenging for finals again next year. To me, they just have the most confusing list. I feel like they have 50 forwards and 50 midfielders, but they're just an interesting one to me. So,
For sure.
So that is every team. Best performers from this year's trade period.
Yeah, Sydney, pretty good.
Yeah.
I think North just did their business quite nicely. Any deal that they were kind of involved in, they just did well out of. They're probably the two that come to mind as far as the better performers. Hawthorn are going to be an interesting one. Collingwood as well. But yeah, I'd say the Swans, just smart business, target free agents, do some cheap deals to get some good talent in the door. And
They just keep rolling. They give themselves a good chance every year.
Yeah, for sure.
It's very frustrating. And bigger surprises. So obviously Taylor Adams, I think was...
Yeah, Collingwood are, like a lot of it was on Collingwood with Ginnivan and Adams. And Schultz. Big surprises. Jack Gunston. Been really interesting to see if Hawthorn actually wanted Jack Gunston. He's not going to cost them much. They do lose Brandon Ryan, so if he does turn into the player they were hoping he does, then that's going to really hurt. It was mostly on Collingwood, just kind of the deals that they ended up being involved in. No one saw coming at all. So,
yeah. Well. That's it. I think that wraps it up for trade period 2023. It's been a very long night. It's been a very long trade period.
It has.
But we finally got through it. So in terms of coverage on Zero Hanger, what's next?
Well, yeah, so from Monday is technically still trades. It's just pick swapping. So that'll run till November 10th, I think. So there's picks that can get done. And
it never ends.
Yeah, it never ends. So that could involve, stuff like pick 1, Geelong's pick 8, so maybe some just minor deals that get clubs up the order or prepare for 2024. And then we've got the draft, obviously, in November 2021. So we'll have some live draft coverage. We'll have plenty coming. I think there's a mock draft even coming this week.
Yep.
Our first edition mock draft. So that'll be one to look out for. Obviously, there's always a heap happening, even though we're past trade period in the season itself.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think we better get to bed. Thank you, Mitch, for rolling through every trade, and thank you for watching. So don't forget, you can catch all the latest AFL news at zerohanger.com. Subscribe to the channel, follow us on all the socials, and we'll see you around.